Resurrexit, sicut dixit. Alleluia. Happy Easter to everyone. The reason I've been focusing so much on Good Friday in recent months is because it's much more than emblematic of the truth. Where is the truth and the source of our redemption? And what happens when we neglect Catholic tradition is that the opposing tradition, the one that's most opposed to it, will wax stronger, and that's Judaism. But Judaism cannot work, and so it has various spin-offs like Zionism and Kabbalah and Globalism, which will affect us all. And this should motivate us to return to our traditions. These problems we will examine in this video, and they are very dark indeed, but the answer is good and sure, and we have it all in our Catholic faith. So I will quickly answer some comments from just three that have come in, and then we'll look at those surveys on the Good Friday liturgy, and then turn to look at some of this dark stuff, how it's inverting the truth. But we remember that Our Lady stood under the cross, and she was never filled with or touched by any sin against those who crucified her son. There was no cruelty from her, no violence, and this, she has to be our model and our keeper, so that it's through charity and through prayer and through self-sacrifice we can win their conversion in God's time. So here's a few comments. Beautiful pre-25 traditional liturgy combined with serious Lent through the Septuagesima 70 yielded the best Easter of my life, and the whole church was packed and all stood for that critical prayer. This is how good it can get. Christ is King. Happy Easter. Then another comment. As far as I could see from the corner of my eye, I was the only one who did not kneel during the intercession for the Jews. Kind of disappointing, given I attend a Latin Mass parish, 62, right? Maybe next year there will be a few more of us. So yeah, we need to be patient, do our little bit, and be steadfast in our little bit, and hopefully that will bring up many more. People in due course who understand why we're doing that. It's motivated by love, and it will be effective. One more set of comments on Good Friday. The previous commentator mentioned about the corner of their eye, because obviously on Good Friday or in any liturgy, you're not looking around at other people, but you get a sense of what's going on around you. So a dozen or so of us were standing for the prayer for the conversion of the Jews. It's a strong start. Almost everyone went up for communion except for two. That's a shame that so many people are receiving on Good Friday. And that book of the Masses of Holy Week in Tenebrae that we, a couple of weeks ago, showcased from Os Justi Press, it is a really beautiful book and very helpful for bringing us deep into the liturgy. Again, Christ is King. And then a comment there, no words can describe the beauty of the 3.5-hour pre-55 Easter Vigil Mass that I was blessed to attend today. Time literally stood still. And that's true, because we're entering into eternity with this. Now, we will take a look at the results of the YouTube survey that I posted on this channel. And bear in mind, we're going to be looking at Zionism soon and Kabbalah. This is connected with Good Friday and whether we receive the tradition of Good Friday or not. The first question, did most people receive Holy Communion? 75% said yes, but we have about a quarter saying it was only the celebrant who received Holy Communion. Now, this isn't a scientific survey reflective of the church across the world, but it's good to know that there's a good number of places where the celebrant alone receives Holy Communion. The reasons for that I've given in a previous live stream, and if I'm still on YouTube in a year, I'll try and give much more concise videos about all these points and why they are the way they are. I did have a collapse in viewers when I posted this live stream description, by the way, talking about Zionism and genocide and Kabbalah. It didn't seem to like that, so I hope my channel survives a year, whatever God will. This whole movement is not going to be stopped. The second question, if you attended a traditional liturgy, was everyone told to genuflect during the prayer for the Jews with the flectamus genua and levate? 2/3 about said yes, everyone was supposed to genuflect. 1/3 said no, and that's good. That's how it should be. Bear in mind that these traditional liturgies, that means there would have been genuflections in all the other intercessions. Now, the third question combines with this second. If you remember that 2/3 responded here, that yes, they were supposed to genuflect according to the instruction flectamus genua, only half, less than half of those actually did genuflect. And here it says a good number of the rest, most of them genuflected, but not all. And there's about 10% where it was said and people refused to genuflect. Nobody did. That's quite a surprising amount. That's a lot. So we see of this 2/3 where they were called to genuflect, less than half actually did. It means that in 2/3 of the churches, either no one is genuflecting because it wasn't said, or about 1/3 are not responding, or at least in 1/3 of churches, some people weren't responding. The fourth question is about the Novus Ordo. Were they expected to genuflect or not? I can't remember, to be honest, how it works in the Novus Ordo, or whether they just do what they like. But about 3/10 say there were no genuflections during the intercessions at all. That's a weakening of our liturgy. 2/3 say you expect to genuflect for all of them, and 10% say not for the Jews. That's very interesting if it's at the Novus Ordo, if they made an exception for the prayer for the Jews, 10% of them. And final question, if it was the Novus Ordo, how many people were crying out, crucify him? About 1/3 said it seemed everybody was. But then we have 1/3 at the bottom, only the clerics read the Passion. So it's best to get to a traditional mass or liturgy, but if you're at the Novus, this is the better way to do it, where only the clerics read the Passion. There's this 3% where it seems very few people cried it out. That's also a good sign. People don't want to say these things. I've missed all the comments, but there's a lot to get through today. One question here from Sylvester K. By the way, I saw you got that team, Don't Kneel. Good. Did anyone get those weird little pamphlets about St. John's Gospel on Good Friday? Interesting if you did, or leave a comment under the live chat to say what was said, if anything, there. So the reason I'm doing all this, why I left the order I'm part of, why I started up this YouTube channel, why I started writing those 5 books, is because of the closure of churches at Easter in 2020-21. Who is it that has this agenda and this power to keep people out of the worship of God? And then Francis issued Traditionis custodes, and I was blocked from a reassignment because of that. I'd already been removed from ministry because I refused to do all the corona measures. And I think it's the same force that's behind both Traditionis custodes, attempting to destroy tradition, and behind the global lockdowns and terrible interference with the worship of God. And that's what we're going to look at in this video, the force that is doing that. It is an alternative, an opposite, an enemy tradition to our Catholic tradition. And this is one of the fruits.
And the guard shouted,
"Crucify him! Crucify him!"
Pilate said,
Take him yourselves and crucify him. I can find no case against him.
The Jews replied,
"We have a law, and according to the law, he ought to die."
And they'll say, crucify him.
Claim to be the Son of God.
And they'll say, we have no king but
Pilate
Caesar.
heard them say this.
So imagine this Catholic
His fears
faith
increased.
Friday saying, crucify him,
Re-entering the
have no king
praetorium,
but Caesar.
he said to Jesus,
But that's
Where
enough
do
of
you come from?
that video.
but Jesus
So
made no
move
answer.
it along.
Pilate then said to him,
The idea of Shabbos.
We'll come back to that in a second. On the thumbnail of this video, we had that image of the Shabbos Queen. This is a terrible result of Kabbalah, where everything is heading. Across the top there, it says, Lekad Dori Likrat Kale Pene Shabbat Nikbla. Come, my beloved. It's echoing with the Song of Songs, this mystical song of love, but they're saying, come, my beloved. This is supposed to be the bride of God. Likrat Kale, let us receive the bride. And that word receive, this is sung in Jewish shuls all around the world. It's connected with Kabbalah. Let us meet the bride. Pnei Shabbat is the face or the presence of the Sabbath. So you know that the Sabbath is the seventh day, the day of God's rest. Well, the Talmud has this idea that there's going to be 1,000-year reign of the messianic age at the end, or reign of peace. And this Pnei Shabbat, the presence of the Sabbath, and at the end, Nikabla, that's the word for Kabbalah. It means tradition or receive, because tradition is something you're meant to pass on and receive, as we have from Christ and the apostles. But they are passing on and receiving a voice from below, basically, which is opposed to the Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and the church. I just say, if this is the bride who we're supposed to receive, I'm glad that I'm celibate. The idea of she as a person is supposed to represent the whole messianic kingdom on earth, this paradise, this age of perfection. They conflate a person with the idea of God's rest. It's also the female divine. It's non-existent, basically, but the Shekinah, the female divine, the lowest of the Sephirot, which is also Malkut, the kingdom. And we're supposed to enter in. You know, every day in the Psalms, priests pray at Matins about entering into God's rest. And they're saying, enter into this female divine. That's what it means to welcome her. So we'll just watch a 1.5 minute video explaining a little bit about this, and you see how it overturns everything.
The idea of Shabbos that Torah describes, until the Zohar, Shabbos is just a day of the week, the day that God rested and that we rest. According to the Zohar, Shabbos is not a day. Shabbos is a person. Shabbos is a queen, matronissa in the Aramaic of the Zohar. It is the mythical bride of God. It is the queen that we welcome in, the person that we welcome into our lives once a week. And it is the queen that we wait for, that when the Mashiach comes, will reign forever, when it will be Shabbos for eternity.
They remind the
queen
of heaven.
The Shekhinah will be reunited, will be re-present. We see how these themes are beginning to interconnect. The Zohar has this need to subvert all the stories. So if the Torah is speaking about people, it's not a person, it's a sphere. If the Torah is speaking about a day, it's not a day, it's a person. It's almost like this. There's a Jewish, sort of a Jewish attitude where everything has to be inverted. One Jew says, Shalom Aleichem, the other Jew answers back, Aleichem Shalom. And the Zohar has this very playful attitude with the Torah, and it feels this need to turn everything on its head. And in the process,
I just say, I hope the microphone's working, it's not playful to turn the Torah on its head. That means the law of God, the first 5 books of the Bible. They want to turn it on its head. And they end up, as we'll see, saying God is cruel, a loser, and we are to rebel against him, overcome him, defeat him, devour God, so that we can assert ourselves as God. This is part of Kabbalah.
It births a very rich engagement with the text and with Judaism. We'll know when we get to the 16th century later on, that Shabbos, the queen, is really not a day anymore, and Shabbos becomes a central idea for the Kabbalists, and the Kabbalists re-envision and change the way that Shabbos is seen. Every single shul around the world today says, L'cha dodi, l'krat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabla. Let us go out, come, let us go out and meet the bride of Shabbos. Who is the bride? Who is the queen of Shabbos? This is the queen, the Shekhinah that the Zohar teaches about. Not a day anymore. It's not a day in the calendar that's coming. It's a queen which is coming, which we dress in our finest, and we invite that queen into our lives.
Okay, so I just lost Sylvester's comment. This is crucial that the evangelicals, the Protestants, are picking up Talmudic Jewish ideas, because that's where Protestantism comes from. It's Judaized Catholicism. The idea that the Holy Spirit is female. This is everything to do with the Shekinah, this Sabbath queen. And the ugliness, by the way, of that artwork is very crucial, because in order to attack life with death, to go against being, you have to attack truth with lies. And to attack truth with lies, you have to attack goodness with evil, with immorality. But it begins with an attack on beauty through promoting ugliness in art and architecture. That's where it all leads to a rebellion against God. Now, we will turn to Lewis Marshall. He is a lawyer from America, active 100 years ago, a founder of the American Jewish Committee. That's him. This is the second volume of his own letters. So this is one of his letters to, I hope I've not lost it. I forget the name of the person he had addressed it to, but he's speaking about Zionism. And up here says, I'm confident that the Balfour Declaration and its acceptance by the other powers is an act of the highest diplomacy. It means both more or less than appears on the surface. Bear in mind, there's something hidden behind Zionism. And then he says, Zionism is but an incident of a far-reaching plan. It is merely a convenient peg on which to hang a powerful weapon. All the protests that non-Zionists may make would be futile to affect that policy. Now, Lewis Marshall is not a Zionist himself, but he's saying you can't stop this, and it's very useful for a plan that he and his colleagues have. He's a founder of the American Jewish Committee, as a powerful weapon for a much bigger aim. And what do we think that aim might be? Zionism is the flip side of globalism. I mean, it's an ultra-nationalism, which you think is a contradiction of globalism, but they work together as an antagonistic Hegelian pair. I can't show you this. Oh yeah, this page has come up. I won't read it all out, but he's just saying how with the Balfour Declaration, there was no suggestion that the Palestinians, the Arabs, would lose their land, and that nobody should say that at that stage. But he said the Arabs outnumber the Jews at least 5-1 in Palestine, and it's their land. And Britain, we know Britain and France do not have the right to take land off the Palestinians to give to anybody. There's no legal basis for this. While we're here, this is the last thing we'll come to. This is a page about Kabbalah and the tree of life. These 10 sephirot, so the top one is Keter, means crown, corona. Oh, I didn't want that. And the bottom one is Malkut, or the kingdom. It's also the Shekinah, this female divinity. And all the top 9 ones are supposed to enter into a sexual embrace with this one of creation, the kingdom. And they notice that here that they call the top one the divine will. It's the Quran, corona. And the kingdom, the Malkut, is this female divinity which we're supposed to realize, so that we can repair the Godhead, as if God is in need of redemption from us. But so I'm straying from Zionism. We'll listen to Max Blumenthal, and he's speaking.
The idea of Shabbos that the Torah describes, until the Zohar, Shabbos is just a day of the week, the day that God rested and that we rest. According to the Zohar, Shabbos.
Zionism as applied in Palestine will always lead towards genocide. That's the ultimate goal. They have to finish 1948. There's no way to do it without genocide.
He says Zionism will inevitably lead to genocide in Palestine, to finish what was begun in 1948. He's correct. But there's a spin on this, a dangerous spin.
And it will always lead towards a messianic right-wing leadership and on demand. He said that.
So I jumped the video there. Now, I'm God bless Max Blumenthal for saying this, and Robert Shear, I think it is he's speaking to, they agree that Zionism is dangerous and it's not really part of Judaism, and it will lead to genocide. But where are they coming from? From this liberal Jewish culture which promotes abortion, which thinks abortion is a human right. I'm not exactly sure of Max Blumenthal's position, but he's here saying what the Democrat Party, where they're at.
His career. What if Joe Biden stated that he would support the Republicans on the Dobbs decision by the Supreme Court and actually move towards banning medical abortion, which is responsible for something like 70% of abortions now, where you just take a series of pills. You would go and form another party. You would leave the Democratic Party and you'd form the abortion party. I mean, they would do it. They'd be so outraged over this one issue. But when we say that we're outraged over the issue of genocide, of Zionism dominating this party,
So he's opposing Zionism with a political program that involves abortion. But 70 million people killed every year in abortion, killed in the womb. It is its own genocide. So Judaism doesn't have the answers, doesn't understand the motherhood of Mary and the love the mother has for the child when there is a supportive father. On earth and in heaven, there's God the Father in heaven to support, and as a foster father of Jesus, Saint Joseph, who legally adopted him, God supplies for Mary. This is the ideal, which in messy life, it's not always that ideal unit of a family, but what we should be legislating for and aiming for and supporting. But Judaism doesn't do that. The idea of sexual liberation and women's liberation involves abortion and contraception. And we'll see in the course of this video how that's totally tied up with this Shabbos Queen, part of the false messianism and false kingdom. It's all to do with an attempt to build up the kingdom of God, but without Christ, without the king. And where's it come from? Jews have asked themselves through the centuries, why do we suffer so much? Why are we so persecuted? Surely we're the chosen people. We should be ruling the world. And the fact that we are marginalized and persecuted causes a psychological catastrophe. If they won't turn to the cross and repent and receive the forgiveness that God is offering, then that's why it goes into these alternative ways of Kabbalah, looking for an alternative way of redemption, which in fact involves breaking every single law there is as a way of getting back at God. It's due to not understanding that the kingdom is not of this world. It's certainly in this world. It's among us. But it's from above, and we can't create it by our own efforts below, no matter what we do. And we certainly can't kill and murder God. That might sound like an exaggeration, but I will, before the next video, I'll show you one of the most disturbing papers I've ever come across. I hope all the sizing works. It's about a solid hatred addressed to being, about Jacques Lacan, the French psychoanalyst. He was a successor of Sigmund Freud. I think he died in the 1950s. This paper is written by Agatha Bielik-Robson. She's at a British university teaching people. This is what happens if you send your kids to university. They're going to get this garbage. And I don't want to have a go at her. She's worked hard. She's a good communicator. And she's open about this stuff. She doesn't seem to realize how dark it is. But it's talking about a conquest of the truth by paths of deception. And that the sons killed the primal father to participate in his forbidden, that's sexual joy they're talking about. So that the first monotheism, Judaism, has this ambivalence between longing after the father and the simultaneous wish for the death of God. This is like mind-blowing, but this explains why society is going the way it's going. Lacan was a Catholic, but he left his Catholic faith, married a Jewess, and his talks and seminars were filled with ideas of Judaism, the Zohar, Kabbalah. And he says, love is a complex reverse or accomplice of a solid hatred addressed to being. It's a terrible phrase about the ultimate being is God. And this means a solid hatred addressed to God. This is supposed to be the way of redemption. As if our experience in life is being in an oppressive iron cage. We see this as because, apparently, we're not God. And that's supposed to be an injustice against us. because you have this hatred of being which aims at the decreation or destitution of the ontological order. God the creator, and because Satan feels and tells us to feel that it's an injustice that you're not God the creator, then you want to tear down the whole of creation, destroy the ontological order. We see this happening through politics and through the banks in the world now. So it's different to nihilism, because it doesn't want to simply disappear and go to nothing. It wants to tear down creation. So to be, well, I've got to get through it very fast because there's a lot in there. But bear in mind this subterranean Bible led by the wisdom of the serpent. They're talking about the serpent in the Garden of Eden. And it has this twisting of the Bible. So this chap, Paul Valery, wrote a poem saying, I am in the place from which the voice is heard clamoring. The universe is a defect in the purity of non-being. It means that instead of saying in the beginning, there's God, the fullness of being, they say there is non-being. And it's in a war with God, with being. And that the creation, the world, is a defect in the purity of non-being. This is the voice of Satan. He says, I am in the place from which a voice is heard. We'll think later of Teilhard de Chardin, who heard this voice and gave himself to it. It's the voice that wrote the Quran and the Zohar. So a human being is to be one who always patiently says no, or a spirit who says no. It wants us to say no to God and no to being, which means no to an increase in life, in grace. Love for the real can only manifest itself as a hatred of being. This is a Gnostic tradition. This rule is where it comes from, Gnosticism. We might think Gnosticism doesn't matter. It's alive and destructive today. There's a note here about Aristotle and St. Thomas, which they call archontic lures of Aristotle and Thomas. That means archontic are these forces from the beginning who are tied in with the creator God, the true God, but are supposed to be these guardians who tyrannize the whole of creation, tyrannize us, because we can't do whatever we want. We don't have this supreme will that can just, an irrational will can do whatever it wants. And so it's as if they're accusing Aristotle and Thomas of serving a tyrannical God by luring us away from a rebellion to him, because Aristotle and St. Thomas give us truth. I don't think we've time for Kafka. He's saying language is a parasite, a veneer, a cancer against human beings. Language is the word. In the beginning, it's the word. It's wonderful. It's to do with reason and truth. And yet they say God uses it to trick us so that all creation is just a facade, hiding his hate, well, his exploitation of us, his repressing us. Just beware of language like fiat, which will, the divine fiat we might come to later. I want to get through to the end of this paper. So she mentions Aristotle, and we should conceive of being, this is about the analogy of being, the highest being, God, we participate in him. And St. Thomas explained this beautifully, of how we share in God's life. First of all, his being, and then by grace and baptism in his life. And then, I think it's Lacan speaking here, in one of his seminars, he said, but do people realize that everything in the Jewish tradition goes against that? Now, Lacan doesn't speak for Judaism. There are Jews who love the Torah and don't want to twist it. They want to discover its meaning. But if you don't discover Jesus Christ in the Torah, that's what my book, Adam Sleeps is all about, then you're going to find falsehood there by twisting the letters around. So Genesis 3:24, I think, is about God expelling Adam from the garden, or from the presence of God. And they say that because the direct object has this particle et, that stands for the Shekinah, the female divine. God is Aleph, and Aleph Tav is everything with Aleph, which means the end point of that first creation. It's this Shekinah, queen of the Sabbath, And they're saying that Adam divorced her. Not that God expelled Adam from the presence of God, but that Adam divorced the female divine. And our task as humans is to reunite the female divine with the male divine through, it turns out to be sexual perversion here on earth. And the goal is to be androgynous, because they say the original man, Adam, was androgynous, both male and female, as God has these male and female elements in him. And this is the way of redemption, to not let yourself be hated by God, not to give into this God's plan of hating us by hating him back. And the Jewish compromise solution is outbursts of filial rebelliousness. Think about that. The sons rebelling against God now and then. So you bear God most days of the year, but on Yom Kippur, it's about a rebellion against him. And well, we see that in the Passion of Christ on Calvary. This is to be repented. This is why we need to pray. This is the Good Friday prayer for the Jews here. Somebody sent me very kindly. They made it themselves, calligraphy. We pray this prayer properly. These people can convert. They can have the veil removed from their hearts. So they talk about this Judaic defiant obedience, which obeys God part of the time in the law, but wants to defy him, rebel against him. And they want a successful hatred for being as an escape from the trap that we're put in us. Because it's saying the other, that's God, destroys this mindness, that means you being you, by pulling me like a glove inside out. They treat God like a torturer, as God is torturing us with existence, so that it's a traumatic to encounter God. We're nearly at the bottom, I think. It's very strange. They talk about castration that the males experience. What they mean is circumcision. God told Abraham to circumcise his son and his household and himself, and then after that, through Moses, give the command, and the Jews would be circumcised. And a very odd, twisted take on it, that this is God castrating us so that we realize that we're slaves of God. But that woman doesn't have circumcision. So whereas the man is chosen for this slavery, the woman is simply abandoned. You can see why psychoanalysts get all this twisted, especially if they're listening to Kabbalah, as Sigmund Freud was, and Jacques Lacan. And here you go, by inventing a female messianic figure of the Shekinah, the abandoned bride. This is Jewish gnosis, which seeks to subvert. It's a Kabbalistic subversion of Orthodox Judaism. So again, not all Jews believe this. This is what happens when the rabbis can't keep people obeying the Torah, and they go off the rails trying to invent their own version. Here's the bit about every Jewish male in the ritual circumcision is as if a castration, a sacrifice he will never forget, and thus will never stop hating his God, always demanding something in return. I do hope the audio is working all right on this, because I've been on it so long. And there's Kabbalistic Christians who are affected by this nonsense, who take some of it on board. And finally, we come to this about God must die, Judaism and the filial rebelliousness. So that the shofar, I think, on Yom Kippur is a symbol of God being murdered, and then a communal consuming of the remnants of the murdered God. We're meant to have a satanic feast on God, so that Moses, when he came down the mountain and broke the tablets of the law because of the golden calf, and grinding the golden bull to powder, Moses destroys not an idol, but Yahweh himself. This is what it's supposed to symbolize. Moses destroys God. And then these people admire it. This Reich admires that idea. Lacan admires Reich articulating this sickness. So Moses coming down from God, from Sinai, radiating with love of the Father, had killed God, because he comes enraged, destroys the golden calf, and makes the Hebrews eat it. This kind of divine cannibalism. a totemic meal. This is the opposite of the Holy Eucharist, where God gives himself to us to be consumed by us, except, God isn't consumed in the Holy Eucharist, yet we receive him. This is the opposite, saying that we're going to eat God to destroy him. A frenzy of self-destruction in which monotheism founders. This is about God's hatred for his chosen people. He loves them. He loves them even when they're crucifying them. He's praying for their repentance, or at least offering them that chance. And the Jews' hatred for their God. Again, a lot of Jews will reject this. But to reject it properly, they need to come to Christ. And that's why we need to pray properly on Good Friday. Because we're talking about forces here that are stronger than humans. You need to be pure and humble so you don't open yourselves up to this wickedness. And here's part of the point, that why they're saying they're jealous and angry with God is as if God is the only one who can say, I am that I am. And these people are saying we should all be able to say that. In fact, the author says we can all say that, but we cannot. When God says I am, he means that his essence and his existence are the same thing. His essence is to exist. St. Thomas Aquinas explained this. God is esse ipsum subsistens, self-subsistent being. When we say I am, we have to qualify it with something like I am a human being, or I'm an Englishman, or I'm a priest. We're not the fullness of being. We are not existence. So we can't all say, as God does, I am. Somewhere in here they talk about, we can say that univocally with God, the same way that God says it, univocally. No, we can't. They're saying God is the echad, the one, the unique, who steals being for himself. Why would anyone think God steals being? He is the source of being and he shares it with us. That's the whole point. Not just existence and not just rational life, but he wants to share divine life with us through baptism, the Holy Eucharist, and a good death with the last rites. Here's more about St. Thomas, that they're saying his analogia entis, the analogy of being, fails, and Aristotelian philosophy fails. It doesn't. Their metaphysics is good and true. And I'm working on a project now to tie in the beauty of the Holy Eucharist and our divine office with good metaphysics. If the church isn't teaching her priests good metaphysics, that's where all this rubbish can come from, because people are lost and at sea. We'll hear from the authoress of this piece soon, talking about Ernest Bloch and the serpent, the wisdom of the serpent, which is nothing less than the lies of the devil. That's the bit about the univocal attempt to speak as God speaks, about our existence. And they're saying creation failed, it got out of hand, it wasn't what God wanted. And this is the last quote here. We will also listen to this about esoteric messianic strains of Judaism put forward the ideas of a female Messiah. Jacob Frank, the Pole in the 17th century, who followed Sabbatai Zevi, who was in Turkey 100 years before. And they see a redemptive potential in the female fallen counterpart of God, the Shekinah. That means they think she, entering the Sabbath Queen through satanic dark cults and perversion, can save us instead of Jesus Christ saving us. Frank didn't quite claim that he was the Messiah, but he did think his own daughter Eve was the Messiah. And we see they talk about Judaism has the potential to produce other female Messiah figures and what that means. So that was a long look at that article. I've missed all your comments during then. Yeah, this is true. Every word is twisted, and it, like the Zohar. It's this Jewish chap, Moses de Leon, in the 13th century in Spain. He was writing it all down and selling it portion by portion to wealthy Jews who were fascinated with magic and Kabbalah. And he said he was copying it from an ancient manuscript. So they were very interested, willing to pay a lot, because they thought it's this ancient esoteric stuff. He was just making it up. After he died, they came to his house to get the manuscript. His wife said there is no manuscript. He was making it up. But that way he could get more money. So he's a liar, he's greedy, and he's listening to a satanic voice to produce it, which talks about this impenetrable spark of darkness in the beginning, forming the formless. Everything's a contradiction, and every contradiction not disorientates you. You're confused, and by the time it's spent 5 minutes confusing you with this lyrical, poetical garbage, you're just open for any lie. Basically, it's the devil totally disorientated you. The question about E. Michael Jones's works, I definitely recommend reading The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. I've read it all. I've taken a look at the Holocaust narrative. There's a lot of interesting information in there. I've not read it all. But these things are important. Did I skip over the problem with when Max Blumenthal is saying that Zionism definitely leads to genocide? If the Jews, thinking back to the Nazis, say that was only caused by anti-Semitism, then I'm afraid that there's going to be a lot more worse situations, like we'll see very soon with what's happening in Gaza, if other countries get involved or not. That depends how well the banks can control them through money or not. But the Henry Kissinger spoke about the Jews have been expelled from 100 different countries or cities through the centuries. They got to start asking themselves if maybe they're part of the problem. And if you say that the Nazi atrocities against the Jews were only caused because of anti-Semitism, you'll say that was the reason for all these persecutions of the Jews through all history. The whole world is anti-Semitic and hates us. And that's what's being told to Israeli children now, through the schools, through propaganda. And that's why they and the IDF are supporting this genocide of the Palestinians, because they've been sold a massive lie. The reason that the Jews have been expelled from so many lands, like England in the 12th century, I think it was because of money clipping. They're basically getting money from nowhere, stealing from the whole nation. Dozens and dozens of them. That's one of the reasons. And if Jews can't face up to this, they'll keep saying, oh, the reason is anti-Semitism, and therefore we're justified in committing genocide against anyone who stands in our way. And there needs to be an honest look at history. And why I'm presenting this as a Catholic priest is because if we expose the problem only at a political or social level, it's going to be horrible. There's going to be worse than pogroms. That's not Christian. It's not the Christian response. It's not the love and the charity that Our Lady shows us that God requires of us. We have to speak the truth, protect our Christian societies where Christ is king from usury and from undue political influence from Judaism, which is completely opposed to Christ's kingship, and then protect the Jews, look after them. The church has taught ever since she got her political freedom, she's been legislating, don't interfere with the worship of the Jews, don't desecrate their cemeteries, don't take their goods off them, don't steal from them, don't harass them. They need to be protected. This is part of God's plan. But we should never subject ourselves to them, or we will become their slaves. Now, I have got one more video to show from the authoress of that piece we were reading.
Zionism as applied in Palestine
I hope
will
I've got the
always
right
lead.
order. Here we go.
Lacan suggests that actually Judaism, which on the surface seems to be kind of a religion of love for creation, a love for the God who created the world as it is, and is a kind of a general religion of affirmation of the worldly existence, actually harbors this hidden dimension, a Gnostic dimension of solid hatred at rest to be. But we, as Bloch would call it. So in Bloch's account, the Septuagint Bible and the wisdom of the serpent is actually the true Judaism, which cherishes the God of Exodus. And the Exodus here is understood as a kind of a Gnostic symbol of liberation, the aim of which is gaining a higher life.
So I hope the mic works. She says the God of Exodus is a God of liberation, who the Gnostics love. They pit him in enmity with Yahweh, the God of creation, saying these are all different kind of gods and they're at war with each other. And the God of creation, Yahweh, is a cruel God, a hateful, tyrannical God who's imprisoning us. And then this, the God of Exodus, Elohim, would be the tyrannical creator, and Yahweh would be the liberator. And so that we can attain a higher level of being, which you see with these billionaires who want to live forever, attain immortality by their own efforts. So we'll listen a bit more.
For the first time, he quotes Paul Valéry's poem, The Sketch of the Serpent, which is a kind of a very a lovely little Gnostic piece, where the serpent, the biblical serpent in the paradise, denounces the kind of a false spectacle of creation, and says that the universe is a defect in the purity of non-being. And when Lacan introduces the concept of jouissance, he says, and I quote, "I am in the place when I hear voice clamoring, the universe is a defect in the purity of non-being." So one cannot make it clearer, really. So,
So I just lost that question. So you see that Gnosticism, by turning the Torah, the Bible, on its head, comes out with these ideas that creation is run by a tyrannical God, and that we want to reach this non-being, that's the pure state. Just responding to this question, what is the intentional purpose of Pope Benedict having an insert in the pre-55? It was actually inserted into the 62, because that's what Rome thinks all traditional priests are saying. And it basically strengthened the Novus Ordo prayer, but weakened the prayer that was in the traditional Missal, the 62, which itself is weaker than what's in the pre-55. John the 23rd took out the word perfidious twice in 1959, Pius XII inserted a genuflection in 55, and then the Benedict, under pressure from the Jews, was trying to appease them with this slightly weaker prayer, although it's better than the Novus. But it doesn't talk about removing their veil from their hearts. If we're not praying for the veil to be removed from their hearts, it will not happen. It cannot happen, except by graces through other people's prayer. But I mean for the people as a whole. That has to be prayed by the church in a public solemn liturgy. And so basically Benedict was under pressure, and he didn't have enough men around him with backbones and a love of the truth to say, no, let's stick with tradition. I don't want to blame him too much. We all need to step up to the plate so that our superiors and those at the top of the hierarchy have the courage to stand strong if they know that the faithful are behind them. Now, that lady you heard speaking about in the last video, she wants to talk about feminine love as a way of redemption, talking about the Shekinah, this what will be the Sabbath Queen. And the sexual liberation means sexual antinomianism, against the nomos, the law, where you break every law, including gender and all the laws of marriage, and the love of mother and child is broken in abortion. I'll look at another earlier example of where this antinomianism runs strong, this rebellion against the law. It's from Jacob Frank, who you might have seen in the third video on the divine will deception in section 4. By the way, while we're here, this is a page from If You Believe Moses 2, the last of the books, and it has that quote from Lewis Marshall about Zionism just being a convenient peg for a more powerful weapon, which is for globalism. I don't know if you can see here, if the horrors of World War II are not properly understood, then they're misused to dehumanize all the Germans, then the Gentiles, and finally Christians. So that at the end of the war and after, Jews are accusing the church for all the deaths and the murder of the Jews in the war. And then priests, fake converts like Father Gregory Baum, are calling for the church to, not to say the Jews need to convert, but Christians need to convert away from Catholicism, because we're guilty for this. This is why you see the attacks on the Good Friday liturgy, because they're saying our liturgy causes anti-Semitism. And this is why I've written these books. It's quite the opposite of this is the truth. This is the first book, If You Believe Moses, volume 1. And all these pairs of brothers in the Torah are showing us that it's leading to a reconciliation between Jews and Christians. We'll just take a brief look at Jacob and Esau, because that's going to come up in one of these videos, and how it leads to reconciliation. So that Esau, as the skilled hunter who hated his brother and wanted to kill him, prefigures those Jews who persecuted first Christ's prophets, then Christ himself, then the bride of Christ, the church. And the two brothers who are so disparate, Jacob and Esau, are presented to us by St. Paul to prepare our minds for the coming conversion of the Jews, not so that we hate and have an everlasting antagonism, but we notice how Jacob and Esau reconciled in the end as part of an arc towards a full reconciliation we see in Moses and Aaron. And St. Paul makes this absolutely clear in Romans with Isaac and Ishmael, and then again in Romans and Galatians with Jacob and Esau. But notice that Jacob, the younger brother, stands for Christians, and Esau, the older brother, because the Jews were before the church was born on Calvary. And then the younger brother, Jacob, usurps. He takes the place of the firstborn. He inherits the blessings from the father Jacob, as the church has inherited all the blessings of God in the new and everlasting covenant. That's how we're to understand Jacob and Esau and so many other pairs of brothers in the Torah. However, the Jews see it the other way around. They believe that they are Jacob and that the Christians, the Gentiles, are Esau. So we will listen to how Jacob Frank turns that around. And this is in the 17th century, how he laid the ground for Zionism. This is why I brought Zionism up at the beginning. It's connected with the Zohar and Kabbalah and a rejection of the Torah and rebellion against God. Obviously, if Christians, if Catholics would believe our tradition, believe our teaching, we would know that the church is the new Israel. I've just been reading this about Psalm 113 from Cassiodorus and St. Augustine, saying that the church is Israel. But if the Catholics don't know this, if our hierarchy isn't preaching it, the priests aren't teaching it, if the faithful don't know it, no wonder the Protestants think that the state of Israel is the Israel talked about in the Bible. And so you get Christian Zionism. If Protestants weren't supporting Zionism, it wouldn't happen. There would be no genocide in Gaza. If America would withhold weapons, there would be no genocide. If the Protestants in America would understand Catholic teaching, there would be no genocide in Gaza. But how can Protestants understand it if Catholics don't understand it? And how can Catholics know it if we aren't preaching it, if we aren't teaching it? We need to understand the Torah, the whole Bible, is a Catholic book. Otherwise, we're going to get these figures like Jacob Frank.
That actually Judaism,
get the next
which
video.
on the surface seems to be...
I've not quite
was for the inner circle. Videos. And it is again, really shocking. And Gershom Scholem, the leading scholar of Kabbalah, did write about this part, that it's when you look at the Gnosticism of his teachings, again, that the world was not created by the good God, that there are these three deities who kind of maintain the world. Similar, he doesn't use the term demiurge, but that there are these figures who don't have our best interests at heart. And they're not even really deities in the way that we might. He says at one point that these three mimunim, these three guardians of the world, actually take human form and they wield temporal power, but they are also in charge of kind of all of the terrible things that happen in the world. You know, at the foundation of his worldview is kind of what he sees as an impossibility that a good God would create this world that's filled with disease and death and strife. And it's helpful to just remember, you know, this is like the Frankist sect and Tokarczuk does this really beautifully in her novel. These are the persecuted part of the persecuted people, right? Yeah. So it's not easy to be a Jew in, you know, Eastern Europe, Central Europe in the 18th century. And these were the Jews that the other Jews persecuted, right? These were the sect within the people that were being persecuted. And one theory actually about Frankism put forth by a scholar named Hillel Levine was that it was kind of a cargo cult, like a way to get out of it, right? This legitimized conversion to Christianity. I'm not really sure that's true, but it's just interesting from a find that easier.
So he's saying that under the control of the rabbis, there are some Jews who hated this control of the rabbis and want to break out, but they come up with these esoteric cults like that of Jacob Frank, who was the one who said that his daughter claimed to be the Messiah. It's like 300 years ago. want to get onto Esau and Jacob. I think it's here.
To get through the camel, get through the eye of the needle, then a rich man, then driven. No, it's the opposite. It's this material success. For Frank, this is really where chosenness and success is demonstrated. The material.
So he's going to talk about worldly success. But the antinomianism, the hatred of the law of Jacob Frank, he once demonstrated by going in a synagogue and sitting on a Torah scroll with a bare backside. And of course, the Jews in the synagogue were horrified, and they didn't know how to deal with it. They left the building. And that's his way of rebelling against the rabbis. And they wonder why they're persecuted of the persecuted. But he hates the Torah. He hates the law and wants to turn it on its head. And so he shows such a contempt for it.
The world. And so he has this, and it's kind of a self-fulfilling or self-legitimizing ideology, right? It legitimizes his own career and his own exploitation, you could say, of his followers and his own advancement. But it also, and at the same time, right, it's not one or the other, also has this conception of a kind of seizing of power. In some texts, Frank actually has a triumphalist account, like the Christianity will be overthrown and so forth. In others, and earlier in his career, it would be coexisting with Christian Europe, but with some power and some autonomy. And, again, this was
the plan to overthrow the church, to overthrow Christianity, is sometimes dreamt of as being a violent overthrow, but other times through syncretism, through interfaith dialogue and sharing each other's rituals and coming up with a ritual to suit all faiths. So this again is why I'm going on about our traditional liturgy. We have to hold on to our traditional liturgy, or you'll see people being seduced away. Even this bishop in America celebrating Hanukkah, lighting the lights in a church. I think it was in a church. He's lost his way.
Literature of the persecuted. These were marginalized, mostly impoverished Jews, ex-Jews, living in an incredibly, it's hard to even say discriminatory, a horribly discriminatory society and social context. And the idea that there could be...
Of course, it is awful to be persecuted and marginalized, and it leads to a searching of the soul. But unless one comes to Christ and realize we persecuted him, our sins are what crucified him, then come up with false theories. So this Rabbi J. Mickelson, who's speaking, he totally is into gender theory. He's going to talk a little bit about that now. But it's the idea that everyone has a right to assert themselves against reality, against God, and that society has to give way before them and uphold every minority with its demands. I think that's a big smokescreen, because when you're actually fighting against an injustice against a group of people, of course that's good, but it's used as a smokescreen so that the minority of the Jews can come through and take over, we'll see, with globalism.
Jewish return to history, return to power. This is what would animate Zionism 120 years later, that we actually have to, we need to get away from this myth of Jacob and Esau and actually seize, gain power for ourselves.
So that was it. So he's saying we can't be the weak Jacob, who they say is an effeminate Jacob in the tents with the women, whereas Christians understand that meaning a contemplative life of prayer, dwelling in God's house with Mary, the mother of God. That's good. That's strength. But the Jews seeing themselves as Jacob say, or Jacob Frank says, we need to seize the power of Esau. Esau is worldly and strong, a huntsman who will go to war. We need to find a way to assert ourselves and grab power. And this Rabbi Mickelson says this is one of the early currents for Zionism. And see where that's leading. We had Max Blumenthal saying Zionism inevitably leads to genocide. And by the way, it's not just for the Palestinians in Gaza. That's bad enough. That's terrible. But it's what's going to come to everyone who stands in their way if we don't follow and establish the kingdom of Christ. Because it's the alternative.
That had its own problematic consequences. But we see that in Frank as well.
Yeah.
Cardozo, who was a follower of Shabtai Tzvi, who created his own theology. Cardozo was also a converso, meaning he had been Christian before he was Jewish. And his theology also is somewhat Gnostic. And, implicit in Sabbateanism is a sort of foundational idea that the true world isn't what we're seeing in front of us, right? So for Sabbateanism, the Messiah has come, where actually it's possible to have messianic consciousness in this world and through transgression of the law. And that's kind of the real reality. And it's this sort of faith that the messianic age is here, despite all evidence to the contrary.
So they talk about a faith that the messianic age is here despite all evidence to the contrary, because they think everything's failed, everything's falling apart. But if we understand Jesus' kingdom as spiritual, we see it's succeeding. There's constantly growth in grace, in souls entering into heaven. If God only wanted peace on earth to make people healthy, he could do that with the click of his fingers. But he wants more. He wants us to love him and love each other. And that's why we're in the state we're in. If Jesus just wanted to feed people, he can multiply loaves. He can multiply bread. It's too easy for God. He wants to see if we will love our neighbor, feed our neighbor. And he gives us all the means to do that if we will follow him. And his kingdom being built up in heaven is absolutely perfect. But Jacob Frank, he is kind of having a reaction against the false messianism of this Shabtai Tzevi from Turkey 100 years before, who also, quoting Rabbi Mickelson, he said that it is possible to attain messianic consciousness through transgression of the law. This idea that breaking the law is our way to redemption. Which is totally what the crucifixion was. They wanted to keep their land and their place. That the place means their temple. And they said, if we don't stop Jesus, the whole world will go after him. So to keep our land and our temple, we need to kill him. And of course, it was by killing him and trying this revolutionary path that they lost everything. And yet the temple is here with the body of Christ, the church. It's there for anyone who wants to enter. And the rejecting that, as this current has never stopped to try to rebuild the Temple of Solomon. So part of Kabbalah is to claim, for example, that the Queen of Sheba, this idea of the Shabbos Queen, by the way, the Queen of Sheba is an early model. They say that she was far stronger and wiser than Solomon, and that the Bible twists this, and the Bible presents a sexist, distorted picture as if she was amazed by Solomon. They say, no, she was a great magician, and Solomon was awed by her. And so she's one of the first figures of this female Messiah that Jacob Frank says. Another was Esther. You remember the Empress Esther, who married the Persian emperor and saved her people, the Jews, when the enemies wanted to wipe them out. They say she achieved that through breaking the law, by marrying a Gentile, by going to bed with a Gentile, basically. And so they think that the redemption and the saving of the people, the chosen people, will happen through breaking sexual laws. It's completely misreading of the situation of Esther and Mordecai and what God wanted of them. And Jacob Frank, being in Poland, also thought that the Black Virgin of Czestochowa was one of these female Messiah figures. So I hate to say that. It's like Moses de Leon, the author of the Zohar, also in 13th century Spain, seeing these magnificent churches going up to Mary, the Mother of God. That's where they think the ideas of the female Messiah come in. So they're looking at Mary and getting the wrong idea. And Jacob Frank is looking at the Virgin of Czestochowa and he's getting the wrong idea, thinking, we can create some female Messiah, so that he thought his daughter would be one too. And so with all this background, it explains more why I made this video.
Inner Circle. And it is
talking about,
remember, Rabbi Nachman predicted
who is a picker.
I
put up Sylvester's comment there because that's absolutely true. And this we mustn't ever forget. I don't know if YouTube's going to kick me off or not, but I think if you silence the church's authentic teaching on our relations with the Jews, you're going to be left with an animalistic, purely worldly, political reaction to what Judaism is doing, and Zionism and Kabbalah and the banks. And it's going to be a disaster until we learn Christ's way is the only way. So we have this Rebbe of Breslov, Rebbe Nachman, who predicts a female Messiah. He was connected with the Frankists who had followed Jacob Frank.
A woman would come to usher in the messianic era. And we can better see how insane this is if we turn to the writings of Jacob Frank. He flew in the air, accompanied by 2 maidens, the like of whose beauty the world has never seen. He looked into an abyss which was like a black sea, hidden in extraordinary darkness. He plunged himself into the bottom, hear the mysteries of the secret religion, and it...
So he begins his works, the Lord Jacob Frank, talking about this black abyss that he plunges into in order to go to the bottom and come up the other side to ascend to the top of a mountain. Coming to the top of the mountain means making himself like a god, or being appointed by the gods of this world to be like a god, which he never achieved actually. But he did plunge himself into the abyss, that black evil. That's the blackness that summoned Teilhard de Chardin, and that Chardin gave himself to, and that has infected the Jesuits and so much of the church hierarchy ever since. And one of the biggest threats against the Good Friday liturgy is coming from the Jesuits, who hate St. John's. Well, they don't hate St. John's Passion. They think it's dangerous. And that's so a misunderstanding of God and the perfection of our liturgy. But understand this about Frank going into the abyss.
Came to him to reveal absolutely everything. Hearing all this, he asked, "And where is the Messiah?" The maiden is in distress and hides herself because others have power. Until her time comes, Frank understands he must keep silent, be secretive of what he has heard. And
this is why secret societies are secretive. Jacob Frank was mixed in with the Freemasons. This is according to Rabbi Michelson, and also alchemy, experiments through alchemy, which continue today.
It's necessary to walk in stealth. This is the wisdom of the serpent. He writes that from the beginning of the world, all alms are given into her hands. All distress and mortifications come from her, and that all who have fallen fell there.
This is the celestial queen, bear in mind, that all pain and suffering and troubles in the world come from her. This queen is really ugly.
Even the first who did a good deed to break the law of Moses and to open that estate. He's saying that it is good to break the law of Moses, that this opens up a new estate. And what does this mean, that all distress, pains and mortification?
Just to say, Roseanne, yes, it's confusing. None of us can understand Zohar or Kabbalah. It's not meant to be understood, or the Talmud. It's meant to be confusing. You can understand snatches, you can try and piece things together. The way is to understand the Catholic teaching, understand the truth of Jesus Christ, the Bible, the Gospels, and then you can see how all this is a completely disintegrated rebellion against it. So any part of the truth that's proclaimed, they will rebel against it with the opposite, but they can't join all those pieces together. So it's completely disjointed. It's meant to be confusing. And for those, it is a blessing to be born Catholic, brought up Catholic. It's amazing. We're not born Catholic, sorry, we're baptized as an infant, say, brought up Catholic. Because otherwise, if you're coming to all this stuff and you can't tell one from the other, how do you know where to start? How do you know that single coherent picture which can withstand every single contradiction through history? But that's why we have the duty to pray. If we don't pray properly, our traditional liturgy, then we're culpable in a part that others won't be drawn to that light, that city on the hill.
Implications come from this cosmic maiden. Louisa tells us of a noble queen who has a long story, one who makes use of her dominion. She shakes the earth, and with her empire hides cities and peoples into her bosom.
I'll speed this bit up, jump forward, but it's saying that the celestial queen causes earthquakes and hurricanes and furious winds to kill people and cities. Who is this celestial queen in the diaries of Luisa Picaretta? If I jump forward.
Causing earthquakes to ruling and dominated. She queen. Do you think of a satanic will? What about when you read of a celestial creature?
All these different names,
female,
celestial creature.
Opposed to Satan, this is light that makes itself known of the Immaculate Queen, the most holy Virgin.
The Queen of Heaven, they're called. She's called in these diaries the
Queen of
Immaculate
Heaven,
Queen,
the celestial creature.
the celestial creature. And you're meant to think of the Virgin Mary because sometimes they'll call her like the mother of Nazareth.
She was the one who was the mother of the future Messiah.
Remember, it's a
But why all these strange titles? Whoever calls Our Lady the Celestial Mother, but here, and the queen of this plan, she, that is the sovereign queen, with whom Louisa cannot compete, and yet she is similar to her. This celestial lady is the true queen of the kingdom of this will. I believe this is the Sophia of the Gnostics, supposed diabolic, false Messiah Jacob
jumping
Frank.
back to Jacob Frank.
And now I will reveal to you the beginning of her.
Because if we understand Jacob Frank's writings, we will see the seeds that come through in Luisa Picaretta's writings, who some researchers say she's descended from the Frankists biologically. I don't know if that's true or not, but the ideas are definitely there. And in the last video, we'll see what the occultists say about why that is.
Coming forth. From the beginning, she is the most beloved of the tree of death, which is one of those three gods who direct the world. She is called that foreign woman, that evil woman who is more bitter than death. She is the opening to the abyss, yet there is an enormous and good thing hidden in her, and one cannot come near that thing.
That good thing hidden in her, but she's the woman of the tree of death, right? Bitter as death and an abyss. But he's saying, do plunge into her, plunge into that abyss, enter into this Sabbath of the false messianic kingdom, and you will get a good thing. And what's this good thing? He confuses us with baptism, but he's talking about that elevation of being, of making yourself God.
Without having entered her, she is the lower door or sphere of baptism. She led all the righteous hermits and the God-fearing into great love and fear of herself. She inspired them with the Holy Spirit, and she revealed to them all the secrets of the law, all these in order that they might fall into the net set by her, and she strangled them with that vile fear.
So this is talking about the celestial queen, bear in mind, strangling everyone with a vile fear, which is supposed to be the law of God. I don't know if you can see on my cursor in the last highlighted yellow paragraph, the large part, it's where he calls her Esther. He's saying the celestial queen was Esther as an incarnation of her. But then before that, you had the Queen of Sheba. Later, Eve, Frank, Jacob's daughter. Later, some other false female Messiah figure.
But our hope, even though we go into the shadow of death, we have nothing to fear because you are with us, because I was given that thing, that I might enter into baptism, that I might break everything and annul all laws which have been until now. Men are called women. Murdering one's baby is called reproductive health. This is the overturning of the most basic laws of life. This is the satanic program, and it has a fascination and a hatred and a jealousy of the woman, she who was called until now the queen ruling.
That's the last words there you see on the page, the one who was called until now the queen ruling. So there's a deception about who's who, and the names being used. So this is the last.
So this maiden figure,
it's not working.
Is
remember, Rebbe Nachman predicted that the little woman.
Right.
So this maiden figure is kind of representative of this.
We'll go back to Rabbi Mickelson to see where this is all leading in the current age from the previous centuries. And he said earlier that the maiden figure is a representation of the sexual liberation that will happen in the Messianic age. They're looking forward to this, and that it's a theme that's not only from Jacob Frank, but also Shabtai Tzevi, and also the Zohar, and therefore Kabbalah.
Sexual liberation that would be a hallmark of the Messianic age.
Oh,
that was taken not just from Sabbatean Kabbalah, but even from Zoharic Kabbalah and Lurianic Kabbalah, that in the Messianic age, the rules of the Torah of this world would no longer apply.
So you're wondering why children are being brainwashed in schools and pressured to be confused over their gender, and even to try impossibly to change it, and given hormone blockers and terrible invasive grotesque mutilation done to their bodies. It's coming from this sick theology. You know, philosophy is upstream of politics. It means that ideas actually shape the world more than political power will do. Well, religion is upstream of philosophy. So like even a bad metaphysics is dangerous if you don't have a true metaphysics, but religious ideas are the most powerful. And the single most powerful idea in the world is the truth, Jesus Christ. But the most destructive is that opposes Jesus Christ and that turns the law on its head and that twists the letters of the Torah. That's what we're confronted with and why we need to take our faith so seriously. There's a lot of it that's new, that it's almost impossible to understand, but I hope what we don't understand is why there's so much war in the world. We don't understand why children are having their bodies mutilated according to government programs, government supporting this. This is madness. Why so much debt? But then you realize it's all part of a theological program, a satanic program. And then it's not like, okay, let's go to war with these Satanists, because then you just fall into the satanic program yourself with lies and aggression and violence. No, the answer to us is Mary standing beneath the cross. And she gave no inch to sin, to following this. She followed her son all the way to Calvary. She didn't plan to be there on Good Friday, but because he was taken there, suffering and beaten, carrying his cross, she went with him. And so we have to go with the cross, with the church. Whatever happens to the church, we don't leave her, never abandon her. And this is our devotion to Mary, of imitating her in imitating Christ. And it will win. It will win. That love is the most powerful thing in the cosmos. And Satan's rebellion is futile.
And there'd be a different Torah that would govern that age. And that is a fundamental antinomian conception. Antinomian just means against the concept of the nomos, or the law. That's within mystical Judaism as well, not just within heretical mystical Judaism. It gets amplified. And the Durnma did engage in some limited choreographed sexual rituals as a way of enacting that the Messianic age. And again, now we're talking 17th as well as 18th century. And that continued apparently through at least the 19th and probably into the...
I'll just say Medjugorje, I think, comes from the same satanic source. It's the false queen of heaven who pours out all these words all the time. That is not like Our Lady, who never wastes a word. People who go to Medjugorje on pilgrimage, whatever, they can be of goodwill. They pray a sincere rosary full of devotion. They make a true confession to the priest, and this brings grace. So no wonder there's so many graces. But you can do that anywhere in the world. You don't have to go to a site where deceivers have set up a false apparition to do it. And in fact, that's damaging, because there's a lot of very rational people out there who look at Catholicism, and when they see Catholics chasing after every daft apparition, they say, well, that's not true religion. I'm not joining the church. So by chasing after false apparitions, people are actually putting other people off joining the church. Now, they have to answer for their own soul why they didn't join, because that's not the true church. But those who put them off through these facile practices will also have to answer for that. And God is merciful, but we want to hold on to the rational religion and make a rational sacrifice. And this will draw in the world.
20th century, where there would be, if not some kind of group sexual activity ritualized on a particular day of the year. So again, like, orgies are great, nothing against orgies, but these weren't quite them. It was not a sort of free for all. It was a ritual. And again, we certainly see that obviously in Crowley, but also in other forms of later Western esotericism, this notion that the sexual act for Sabbatism is a little bit different from how I understand it in later magic. It's not necessarily that act generates power, but it inculcates this messianic consciousness. And for me, and here I get a little bit on my more skeptical side toward the end of the book, I want to kind of take that seriously. I mean, the idea, to me, this is actually the birth of what is now the dominant strain in Jewish spirituality. So the Hasidim took the same notion. They just sublimated the eroticism to erotic prayer with the Shekhinah, with the divine presence. And so there are all these mainstream Hasidic texts, which you should understand men should pray as if they're having sex with the Shekhinah. And that creates spiritual consciousness. That creates.
This is so wicked, talking about entering in. Well, there's a bridegroom relation between the church and Jesus Christ, but it doesn't have a sexual aspect because there's no sexual activity in heaven, none. Jesus said that marriage is for earth, for multiplying on earth. It's a good for earth, but not in heaven. They're not given or taken marriage in heaven, in the resurrection. And in Jesus Christ, in the Holy Family, in Our Lady, St. Joseph, no sexual activity. Not because it's a bad thing, but they're working on this spiritual fruitfulness and spiritual children. And yet this idea he's saying is the mainstream now in Judaism. Even Hasidic Judaism have sublimated this erotic love with God so that when they pray, they think they're having sex with the Shekinah, with the divine female. And that is supposed to increase their sexual consciousness. No wonder there's total confusion in the world. And you can see that both these men are being open about it. They think they're teaching something good, which is why we have to pray.
This closeness, this expanded mind, this cleaving to the divine. That, in a more tame way, is what's commonplace in spirituality. So you get into a kind of ecstatic experience, and that experience brings you closer to God. But if we look historically in the lineage, this is that lineage of that experience. And so it's sexuality with the incarnate Shekhinah, with the incarnate divine feminine, confirms and actualizes the messianic consciousness.
Yeah. I wonder, and it's something I've been wanting to research, but esotericists love to make connections. They're not always helpful or accurate.
More charts.
Yes, more charts. Yeah. But at the end of the 19th century, a large variety of esotericists, including Gnostics. So the Gnostic Church is established in 1890, comes out of the French occult revival. We're expecting an incarnated female.
So just before we go back to him saying about the French occult revival in the 18th, 19th century, what comes from it, this point definitely a lefty, right? If you don't have what is labeled right-wing Jew, who is the Zionist, causing genocide, you have what's labeled your left-wing ones causing the LGBTQ movement to spread around the world. Which is why we need Christ, because the truth is integral. It's the good is integral. That means if it's not all good, then it isn't good at all. In the true good, in Jesus Christ, nothing is failing, nothing is bad, and that's what we need, the full truth.
Messiah. To sort of herald in the 20th century. And, we're talking almost 100 years earlier with Eve Frank. But, I wonder if she was an influence on this thought, because the Frankists are mixing with this earlier material, these earlier groups, this earlier stream that becomes such a big influence at the end of the 1800s. So just a connection, something I've been thinking about, something I want to research to see if it's more solid. Yeah.
It's fascinating to think about that. So where there is a more mainstream Kabbalistic thread here with the female Messiah is that the Messiah would in the system of the Sfirot, the Messiah is the Shekhinah, is the manifestation, the divine presence. So for Shabtai Tzvi, who was male, he actually has a very complicated gender identity. And I don't want to get too projecting back concepts of gender from our century to theirs, but it is the case, he was seen as having a female soul, essentially, or maybe being not quite a biological woman anatomically in the body of a man, but having feminine attributes. There are also a number of erotic and homoerotic hymns that are sung by male disciples about the beauty of Shabtai Tzvi. And that's seen as not quite homoerotic, because it's the beauty of the Shekhinah incarnate in Shabtai Tzvi. Of course, for me, I do a lot of it. Like I said, I do some queer theological work. Of course, that's homoerotic. That's completely fascinating that there's this complicated bi-gendered figure. Again, not using trans language from our century, but that there is this complicatedly gendered figure who is the Messiah. And part of that is because the Messiah is the Shekhinah, is Malchut, the divine, the kingship, queenship of the divine on earth. I was unaware.
So I missed back where the person calling himself Deacon John there said that the French occult revival picked up on these streams of Gnosticism and Sabbatism and Frankism talking about the coming of a female Messiah at the end of the 1800s. Is it a coincidence that that's when Luisa Picaretta started writing her diaries? This is why I think she's the victim of powerful men with an agenda who have done something to her, so that she then starts channeling that same voice that produced the Zohar. And the 36 volumes of the diaries, it's 3 times 12. This is also a Kabbalistic numerology, and there's so many more layers to it. Just 5 seconds more of this video, and then I'll wrap up with one more slide and an explanation of where the good lies, the true metaphysics and the true life and liturgy.
That until this conversation, that there's a notion of a female Messiah ushering in the 20th century. That to me is totally fascinating.
They said it about the female Messiah ushering in the 20th century. And that's why I think we saw this earlier about Kabbalah and the tree of life. So they're overturning Genesis 1, 2, and 3 with this structure that's supposed to be the structure of reality, which is very layered. So on the one hand, you have these 3 items at the top and 7 below. We might think of the Blessed Trinity and the sacraments because it tries to echo some truth. Or else you have 9 above, forces of the gods, and 1 below, which is the kingdom or the female divine. And the whole thing is meant to make this Adam Kadmon, the original man, an androgynous man, who when he unites with the female divine or the Malkut, the kingdom, then creation is made whole again after the disaster that they blame on Elohim, God of Genesis. You know, the Zohars say that the beginning of the Bible, Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning created God, the heavens and the earth. And they say that, notice it says in the beginning, or with the beginning, it created God. They say the beginning created God, which is rubbish. I mean, they know full well that the subject comes after the verb in this case. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But they want to say something came before that created God, that God is a creature, and in his furious tantrum, God created the visible world that is a prison full of suffering for the chosen ones, these chosen ones who reject God's path but want to be God themselves. Do you understand why that makes so much sense of history and politics and empires and banks and the mess of the world that we see today? It will come good. But I wanted to pick out just 2 elements of this system of Sephirot, which is completely made up, by the way. And when you make up a system this complicated, of course you can apply it to lots of things in life, like this middle Tiferet is connected with every other part. I think it's meant to represent the male. But it's false. It's just what gets me is the crown at the top, the corona, and the kingdom at the bottom, the Malkut. And we have the kingdom of the divine will, because this crown is also will. I don't know if I can. Oh yeah, it's right here. They say it themselves. Where does it have will? Somewhere in here. I'm going to have to do a search for will because I can't find it. Oh, I'm being very slow. It says it right there in the title, doesn't it? The crown is the divine will of the Creator. The whole divine will devotion, I believe, is Kabbalistic. Why? Because the last one, the Malkut at the bottom there, we'll scroll down. This is the kingdom of the divine will that you're supposed to be summoning when you say, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Not from the Our Father, which the church has already interpreted. Jesus' kingdom has come. They want this new messianic kingdom, the one that comes about through sexual antinomianism, in fact, the breaking of every law, sitting bare-assed on the Torah, breaking all the laws of logic, breaking the laws of ontology, of being. And here you see another name for Malkut. Malkut also corresponds to the mouth. So you remember the diaries of Luisa Picaretta are full of her supposedly kissing this pseudo-Jesus. They get into bed, they caress each other, they're kissing. And this Malkut represents the mouth of God. And this mouth pours out black bile, evil, that Luisa is supposed to swallow. That's not from Jesus, that's from hell. And the scene, which I cannot understand the people who support this devotion once they've read that passage, two passages, one where it says the infant Jesus was beating Louisa all over, punching her, and then kicking her. How can this be about Jesus? And there's another one where he sends someone to her, the confessor or whatever, who tells her, take all your clothes off. The Lord wants to crucify you. And then he said, he's coming soon. So she's there alone in the room, takes off all her clothes, but holds them in front of her because she's embarrassed. She says she's naturally embarrassed to be standing there naked. So she holds her clothes in front of her. Then this pseudo-Jesus walks in and bursts into a rage and says, why didn't you do like I told you? Why aren't you completely ready for immediate crucifixion? Because she's holding her clothes. And so she drops them on the floor, but he storms out furious and says, I'll come back another time to crucify you. This is totally psychotic way of grooming someone for sexual abuse, that you insist that they do these bizarre actions to break down their dignity so that you can then do what you want with them, and you show affection one moment, caressing and kissing all over, saying you're the special one, you're the one that's going to save the world, and the next moment you're furious and angry with them because they're not obeying your every command. This is the will of Satan, the totalitarian will that wants to take over the world and come through some female figure to bring in the messianic kingdom and age, some Shabbos Queen, some false queen, who, by the way, if I can find that image, boy, she's ugly. She's ugly, yeah? And yet we have a true queen of heaven and earth. And this is where the victory lies, in the triumph of Our Lady's Immaculate Heart. So I'll finish. It's been an hour and a half. I'll take a quick look at the comments in a moment. I just want to say our traditional liturgy is much more than truth. It's much more than teaching and doctrine. We need true doctrine, Catholic doctrine, right? We even need the true metaphysics. Although it's not totally a matter of salvation, you can't explain the Holy Eucharist as best as human beings can without the substance and accidents as explained from St. Thomas, taken from Aristotle. That's how we understand reality. But most of all, the liturgy is more than truth because it is life. It is this being, God giving us the fullness of being through the worship and praise of God, which is optimal in any apostolic liturgy. And the Roman Rite happens to be the one that God chose historically to be the most widespread around the world. All the apostolic liturgies are good, Orthodox or Coptic. But the Roman Rite is the most universal, and for a reason. And the attack on being, on life, passes through the attack on truth with lies, on goodness through immorality, and on beauty. The attack on beauty by presenting us with ugliness. Like this, no thank you. So we have the most beautiful, good, true, living Queen. We can pray the rosary every day, wear the brown scapula, and consecrate yourselves to Our Lady. I'll take a quick look down the comments, otherwise I need to wrap this up to keep the live stream short. By the way, I'll probably do less videos over the coming months because I'm concentrating on another project which is part of the same strategy, and hopefully it's going to have more impact than these videos. Yes, St. Paul says, oh, for some reason the comments aren't showing. I think it's because of these images. St. Paul calls the antichrist the lawless one. Absolutely right. Overturning all law. And that you make a connection with the goddess Kali, yeah, because it's from Satan. So you have different streams and different cultures in the world coming up with these similar ideas, which point back to that one source. We shouldn't be surprised when we see contradictions in Zohar or Judaism, but that the common themes come back to this totalitarian will that wants to deceive us and deprave us. so that we're infected by his spirit, giving way to the thing by plunging into the abyss, this search for knowledge and for power instead of humility. And self-sacrifice, not self-destruction, because the sacrifice is only worthy if it's on God's terms. Right, I'm near the bottom. So very happy Easter to you all. I'm getting a hard time for some of the things I'm saying and writing, so I do appreciate the support. I don't want to defend myself too much, because that becomes a distraction from the priority job. Just try and present the truth, and I believe God will defend you if you need defending, even if he defends you through other people. But I do appreciate your support, because it's a mad, horrible thing that we're up against. And let's hope in the triumph of Our Lady's Immaculate Heart and blessed first Saturday. I can't find the... Oh, here we go. God bless you all.